The Biden administration has asked the Supreme Court to keep the eviction moratorium intact. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an article for you today out of The Hill, and it has to do with the eviction moratorium and what's happening with it in the Supreme Court. But before I get into that article, please hit that like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment down below. And I'll keep trying to bring you great articles about what's of interest to landlords and things about the eviction moratorium. So this article is called Supreme Court Asked to Keep Eviction Pause in Place. The Biden administration, backed by nearly 24 Democratic state attorneys general, asked the Supreme Court on Thursday to leave intact a temporary nationwide pause on evictions. The request comes after a group of landlords asked the Supreme Court last week to effectively end the eviction moratorium put in place by the CDC to help financially distressed renters remain in their homes amid the pandemic. Yeah, this isn't surprising at all, okay? We pretty much already realized that the Biden administration wants to keep these eviction moratoriums going, and I wouldn't doubt for 1 second. Right now, the eviction moratorium is supposed to end at the end of June, but I wouldn't doubt that it's going to be extended September, maybe even longer, maybe all the way till the end of the year, because they don't have a good plan in place for what's going to happen to these tenants when these evictions start happening again. And you know, they want to, you know, as you can tell, it's all Democratic state attorneys, so they're using this as a very partisan thing when it shouldn't be very partisan. Okay, there's landowners and there's property owners and there's landlords on all sides that are getting screwed over by this eviction moratorium, and it shouldn't become a partisan issue. It should become an issue of property rights. And you know, if it has to go to the Supreme Court for them to say that the government can't take your property without compensation, then so be it. But I would prefer that they would go ahead and end this thing before then, you know, just stop fighting it. Eventually this has to end, and it's going to be bad for tenants, but there's nothing you can do about it except for make it worse. In a 38-page filing, the Biden administration argued that the CDC policy is a lawful and necessary step to prevent the spread of COVID-19 across state lines, which would result from evicted tenants being forced into homeless shelters or other crowded living arrangements. Democratic attorneys general from 22 states in Washington, D.C. backed the administration's position Thursday, and a friend of the court brief submitted to Chief Justice John Roberts, who handles D.C.-based emergency matters. Well, the big problem with that is the huge number of people that have been vaccinated recently, as well as the greatly declining numbers of people who are infected with it, and the much lower hospitalization and death rates. So if they are telling us that, hey, things can be opened back up, things are going back to normal, then this CDC eviction moratorium doesn't even make sense anymore, okay? And so they're kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They're saying, oh, well, you know, things can go back to normal, but it's too much of an emergency to have it. Like, no. Okay, at this point, we can resume the way things were running before the pandemic began. So, yeah, we need to get these evictions rolling ASAP. Democratic attorneys general, I think I already read that. Recognizing that the ability to stay home and quarantine is an essential part of pandemic response, the CDC order has been critical in helping states limit the spread of COVID-19, the attorney generals wrote. The case concerns a challenge to the CDC moratorium brought by the Alabama Association of Realtors and several co-plaintiffs in federal court in D.C. The litigation has produced mixed results over the past several weeks. You know, one of the biggest issues that I have and that a lot of other people have is that the CDC does not have the authority to put a halt on evictions, okay? They're taking people's property rights away from them. And I don't know anywhere written in any law that says that the CDC has the right to take people's property away from them. Okay, they are going beyond the powers that were given to them by Congress, and they're violating the Constitution, in my opinion. So that's why I believe this needs to end. The landlord group secured a legal victory last month when U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich in D.C. struck down the moratorium as a government overreach. But Friedrich, a Trump appointee, agreed to stay her ruling, preventing it from taking effect while the Biden administration appeals. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals last week declined the landlord's request to lift the stay, prompting the group's emergency request to the Supreme Court. Yeah, I covered that in my last video, or not my last video, but one of my last videos, that basically, they immediately appealed the decision to the Supreme Court, and now it's up in their hands. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court takes decisive action and doesn't just try to throw it back down to the lower courts again. The property owners told the court in their brief that landlords have been losing $13 billion every month under the moratorium. The total effect of the CDC's overreach may reach up to $200 billion if it remains in effect for a year, they wrote. Numerous court battles have been waged over the policy's lawfulness, creating a patchwork of interpretations across the country as property owners have sought to evict tens of thousands of cash-strapped renters. Yeah, they have created a huge mess. $200 billion if this lasts a year, okay? I mean, that's completely... there's no way that the landlords are going to be able to get their money back from this, okay? They're destroying businesses, they're destroying livelihoods, and they're only hurting renters in the long run because debts will to continue to accumulate. It's not like these debts are just going to disappear. I know what they're hoping. They're hoping that the rental assistance program will somehow compensate these landlords. Well, in a lot of cases, they won't. There's nothing in here mentioning that, hey, what about those tenants who do not qualify for the rental assistance but do qualify for the CDC eviction moratorium? Are those landlords just screwed? That's the way it seems. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that they don't want to add in. What if the tenant has been in their unit since before the pandemic began and they had an eviction order? There's still no way to get that tenant out with these eviction moratoriums going on. So yeah, they need to address these issues. They need to allow evictions to continue. It's like pulling a Band-Aid. It's gonna hurt when it first comes off, but then afterwards, you'll be fine. Okay. So if we get things back to normal, things will eventually, return to just the regular status of things. So yeah, always there's going to be evictions. Always there's going to be people who won't be able to pay. The problem is when you have them just stuck in other people's properties, you're taking away their right to get justly compensated. Okay? So, this stuff is completely ridiculous, and it doesn't really surprise me one bit that the Biden administration is fighting it. And like I said, I do believe that they're going to extend this eviction moratorium maybe all the way till the end of the year.